They say silence is peaceful, but what if it's hiding something? It started when Alina returned to her childhood home after 10 long years. A quiet village on the edge of forgotten woods, where mist clung to the ground like a memory that wouldn't let go. Her mother had passed away suddenly, and Alina had no choice but to come back to the place she had once escaped from, without ever really knowing why. The house stood the same, old, tired, and heavy with a kind of stillness that felt too thick, too aware. It was as if the walls had been waiting, listening. Her footsteps echoed a little too loud on the wooden floor, and that basement door, still locked, just like when she was a child. No one ever opened it. No one ever spoke about it. Her mother used to say, "Some things are better left sleeping," but there were signs. Faint knocks at night, whispers that didn't seem to come from anywhere, a mirror that showed things behind her, things that weren't really there. And in all of it, one question kept haunting her: what was buried in the silence of this house? As Alina digs through her mother's old letters, photos, and recordings, a name keeps showing up. A name she doesn't remember, but it seems familiar, almost like a part of her. The more she searches, the more the silence starts to shift. It's not peaceful anymore. It's watching, waiting. And then, on the fourth night, something changes. The basement door is unlocked. But what lies behind it isn't just an old room. It's the beginning of everything she was never meant to remember. And maybe some silence should never be disturbed. The door creaked open slower than she expected. It wasn't rusty. It wasn't jammed. It opened too easily, like it had been waiting for her. Alina stood at the top of the stairs, holding her breath. The air below was cold, still, and carried the faint smell of damp wood and something older, like forgotten time. She hadn't been down there since she was 6. Back then, her mother would scold her for even looking at the basement door. "It's not a place for children," she'd whisper, as if the walls might overhear her. But now, her mother was gone, and all that was left behind were memories wrapped in silence. Alina turned on the flashlight in her phone and stepped onto the first stair. The wood creaked under her weight, each step deeper, pulling her further into the unknown. The basement wasn't large, but it felt endless. Shadows stretched across the walls, hiding things she couldn't quite see, and the air felt thick, like it pushed back as she moved forward. Boxes covered in dust lined the walls, old books, photo frames, broken furniture. But in the center, something was different. A small wooden chair faced the wall. On the floor beneath it, a circle drawn in chalk, half erased, like someone tried to scrub it out in a hurry. Her heart started to race. She crouched down, wiping the floor gently with her hand. It wasn't just a circle. It had strange markings, symbols she didn't recognize, but something about them felt familiar, like she'd seen them before, in a dream, or maybe somewhere else in the house. Suddenly the light from her phone flickered, once, twice, then steadied, but it was enough to shake her. She stood up quickly, bumping into one of the shelves behind her. A small box fell to the floor, the lid popping open. Inside was a stack of old cassette tapes, each one labeled in her mother's handwriting, but they weren't marked by date or subject, just names, and one of them had hers. Alina, age 6. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Her mother never recorded anything, at least, not that she remembered. But if this tape was real, what could possibly be on it? She turned around to leave, but the basement door was no longer open. Alina froze. The door at the top of the stairs was closed. She was sure she'd left it open. She hadn't heard it shut. There was no wind, no sound, just the growing hum of silence pressing in from all sides. Her breathing grew shallow. The air felt heavier now and colder, like something unseen had joined her in the room. Clutching the cassette in one hand, she slowly backed away from the chair, her flashlight shaking slightly. Her phone screen blinked again. The battery was draining fast. She had to get out. But before she could move further, a soft creaking sound came from behind one of the shelves. It wasn't loud, but enough to stop her in her tracks. She waited, straining to hear, but there was only silence. Back upstairs, she finally forced the door open and rushed into the kitchen, locking it behind her. She stared at the cassette, her name written in faded ink. Questions ran through her mind like a storm. Why had her mother recorded her at age 6? What had happened that year? And why didn't she remember any of it? The static was sharp at first, then silence, then a voice. Her own. Young. Fragile. Singing a lullaby she didn't remember learning. Then her mother's voice. Low, almost whispering. She's getting worse. The dreams are back. She says he talks to her from the walls. I've sealed the door again. The tape ended. Alina stared at the player, heart pounding. Who was he? And what door had her mother sealed? The next morning, Alina walked to the edge of the woods behind the house, a place her mother always warned her to stay away from. She remembered fragments now. A tree with markings, a voice in the leaves. As she reached the clearing, she saw it. An old well, covered with stones and moss. And carved into the side, the same symbol from the basement floor. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. She turned. No one was there. Alina stood still, barely breathing, her eyes scanning the trees. The woods were quiet, unnaturally so, like the world was holding its breath. A breeze passed through the leaves, but nothing moved. No birds, no insects, just the distant creak of branches that sounded far too much like a whisper. She stepped back from the well slowly, her mind racing. The same symbol from the basement was here, carved deep into the stone. That couldn't be a coincidence. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt old. Older than the house, older than her family. And now that she'd seen it again, something inside her stirred. A memory too faint to grab, like a dream just out of reach. She returned to the house before dark, her skin crawling the entire walk back. Every shadow looked sharper now. Every creak in the floor made her flinch. That night, she found more tapes hidden in her mother's room, behind a loose panel in the closet wall. Some were labeled with other names. Elias, Mira, Test 3, and one that simply said, "Don't listen." She couldn't sleep. At midnight, she sat in the hallway outside her old bedroom, the door slightly ajar. For a moment, she just listened. The house was alive. She could hear soft tapping from below the floorboards, as if something was pacing. Then the whisper returned, faint, male, and not coming from her own thoughts. Her name. Alina. She turned toward the basement door again, but didn't move. Something else had changed. Her childhood drawings, still pinned to the hallway wall, were different now. In one, a stick figure stood by the well, with black scribbles drawn over its face. In another, a figure stood in the basement, eyes red. She knew she hadn't drawn that. The next day, she visited the village library and found an old man who recognized the symbols. He didn't say much, but his face turned pale when she showed him the pictures. "You should leave," he said quietly, "before it remembers you." "What is it?" she asked, voice shaking. "It's not a what. It's a silence, a hunger. Once it speaks to you, you're part of it." That night, she played the Don't Listen tape. At first, it was blank, then static, then breathing. Deep, slow, too close to the microphone. And then a voice, the same one from the woods, from her dreams. "You opened the door. You let it wake." Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. Her phone shut off. Everything turned black. She stood up, heart racing, and heard footsteps in the hallway. But she was alone, or at least, she had been. The footsteps stopped just outside her bedroom door. Alina's breath caught in her throat as the silence stretched unbearably long. Then, a soft knock, slow, deliberate, almost polite. She didn't move. The knocking came again, louder this time. Her heart pounded against her ribs, the only sound in the dark room. She forced herself to speak. "Who's there?" No answer. Gathering courage, Alina grabbed her phone and flicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the door. It was slightly cracked open, but no one was visible. She reached out slowly and pushed it wide. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, electric. She moved forward, drawn to the basement door. It wasn't closed anymore. It was wide open, inviting, or perhaps daring her to step inside again. But then something caught her eye. A small, folded piece of paper pinned to the wall next to the basement stairs. The handwriting was unfamiliar but unmistakably deliberate. She unfolded it carefully, and the words chilled her. "You are not who you think you are." Alina's mind raced. What did it mean? Was it a threat? A warning? Her fingers trembled as she turned the paper over. On the back, faint scratches had formed a date. One from over 20 years ago, long before she was born. Suddenly, a flood of images crashed into her mind. Flashes of a child in the basement, crying, whispering secrets to shadows. A woman who wasn't quite her mother watching silently from the corner. And then a name she didn't recognize, whispered over and over. Elias. She realized with a cold shock that Elias wasn't just a name on a tape. Elias was part of her story. But how? The silence in the house seemed to thicken again. The shadows moved slightly, as if alive. The well behind the house, the basement symbols, the tapes, everything was connected, but in ways she couldn't yet understand. Alina rushed to her mother's old journal, tucked away beneath a floorboard in the attic. The pages were yellowed, fragile, but the handwriting was clear. Her mother had written about a curse, a darkness bound to their bloodline, a presence that could cross the veil between silence and speech, memory and nightmare, a warning not to awaken what sleeps beneath the house. But there was more, a secret buried deeper. Her mother wrote of a choice made long ago to protect the family by locking away a part of the past, and a child who was lost between two worlds. Alina's hands shook as she read the final line. "If the silence wakes, it will not be me who answers." At that moment, the lights flickered back on, harsh and cold. From the basement came a sudden guttural sound, a low growl like something awakening from a deep, endless sleep. Alina knew one thing for sure. The silence was no longer just waiting. It was coming for her, and this time, it wasn't alone. Alina's heart hammered as she stood at the basement door. The growl, echoing from below like the house itself, was alive and angry. The flashlight in her hand flickered, casting long shadows that twisted along the walls. She knew she couldn't run anymore. The silence had woken, and it was demanding something only she could give. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The cold air wrapped around her like a shroud. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly in the dark, illuminating a narrow path that led to a small hidden door she had never noticed before. The door creaked open to reveal a dim room, its walls covered in old photographs and letters, fragments of a forgotten past. At the center, a figure stood, tall and shadowy, but with eyes that glinted with recognition. "Elias," Alina whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure nodded slowly, the darkness around him pulsing like a heartbeat. "You were never just Alina. You were always part of this, part of the silence." Memories flooded back. She wasn't her mother's only child. Elias was her twin, lost to the silence long ago when their family tried to bury the past. The tapes, the symbols, the locked door, they had been a way to keep Elias contained, to keep the silence from spreading. "But why me?" Alina asked, tears in her eyes. "Why now?" "Because the silence is breaking," Elias said. "It needs both of us to be whole again." Fear clawed at her chest as Elias stepped closer. But then, instead of attacking, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than the silence. You have the power to end this." Alina realized the silence wasn't a monster. It was a part of her family's pain, a wound that needed healing, not destruction. Gathering every ounce of courage, she spoke words she barely understood. Words from the old tapes, from the symbols, from the journal. A deep hum filled the room, the darkness swirling and then slowly fading, replaced by a warm light. Elias smiled, fading into the light. The silence was no longer a prison, but a memory finally released. As Alina stepped out of the basement, the first rays of dawn touched the house. The air felt lighter, the shadows less threatening. But then her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message appeared on the screen with no sender. "This is only the beginning." Alina stood in the soft morning light, the house around her feeling somehow new, as if it had been waiting for this moment to breathe again. The oppressive weight of silence that had haunted her since childhood seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet peace she hadn't known was possible. The basement no longer felt like a place of fear, but a part of her past she could finally face. She thought about Elias, her twin, and the family secret that had kept them apart for so long. It wasn't just a story of loss or darkness, but one of love and protection, of desperate choices made to keep everyone safe. The silence had been a shield and a prison, an echo of pain and memory trapped beneath the house. Alina walked through the rooms, touching the worn walls and old photographs. She understood now that the past could no longer be buried in shadows or locked away. It had to be acknowledged, healed, and remembered. Only then could the silence truly rest. She decided to stay, to restore the home and the memories it held, to bring light into the quiet corners. With each day, the whispers faded, replaced by laughter and life. The village, once a place of secrets, slowly became a part of her healing as well. Yet, the message on her phone lingered in her mind. This is only the beginning. It was a reminder that some stories never truly end, that silence can be broken, but its echoes might still ripple through time. Alina smiled softly, accepting that her journey had changed her, made her stronger. The silence had taught her to listen, not just to fear, but to the hidden truths within herself and those around her. In the end, Where the Silence Sleeps wasn't just a story about darkness or mystery. It was about finding courage in the quiet, facing what's buried deep inside, and choosing to live despite the shadows. And as the sun rose higher, Alina felt ready for whatever came next.